I think the big misconception that a lot of people have about producers is they think producers are people who just find financing for their films.
I immediately fell in love with the story and the script.
We were looking for an arresting image that could be well represented in like a little icon on your TV.
There's something about bad sound that just reads as cheap.
This was a case of bend over and lose your filmic virginity, but you'll get a movie made and your name will be on it.
Anytime there's like that amount of money, there's going to be lawsuits.
There's nothing more important than the safety and the health of everyone who's working on a production.
It was like a passion project. They said, we want your movie. It was a bidding war. It was a major bidding war.
You can't buy that kind of publicity.
Hello, producers. You are listening to Producerville. We are the only podcast that features honest, no bullshit talk with independent movie producers only. I'm Anthony Masi, and my company is MasiMedia, and we've been specializing in producing content in the horror genre since 2005. And I'm here with my co-host and development consultant at MasiMedia, Nate Ragon. And we were talking one day about podcasts, and we realized that there isn't a podcast anywhere that puts producers only in the spotlight. So what did we do? We created one.
Our hope is that Producerville will be kind of like a little film school for producers, where you tune in week after week to hear brand new conversations with producers that have something to teach you. We ask our interviewees questions about everything from development to funding to production and delivery, even marketing and distribution. And we're doing this as long as we can to help you become a better producer. And it's free.
Our premiere episode features an interview with Gregg Hale, who is the producer of the Blair Witch Project. Everybody in the world knows Blair Witch Project. So if you're a producer and you're listening to this, you have to kind of hear what they went through to make this movie, and it's fascinating. Now, Gregg is going to mention two gentlemen named Ed and Dan. Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick were the writers and directors of the Blair Witch Project. So that will put those names in context for you when you hear him mention Ed and Dan. But again, we're talking to Gregg because he was the producer of the film. One thing I wanted to point out was a book that he mentions. So you might want to put this on your to-get list when you hear the interview. Gregg mentions a book by the name of Spike, Mike, Slackers, and Dykes, a guided tour across a decade of American independent cinema, and the author is John Pearson. So wanted to point that out for you in case you're looking up to beef up your producing reading. The book's a little dated, but Gregg is saying it's a very valuable book, so pick that up.
Yeah, Gregg gave a great interview. He talks a lot about the movie, about how it completely changed from a documentary style in search of type show to the found footage format. He talks about Sundance and how they navigated like all the craziness and hype of the Sundance experience. And he talks about contracts and how badly written contracts are a bad thing.
So it's an exciting interview. We really hope you guys enjoy it. So we'll get right to the interview with Gregg Hale. And then when we're done, Nate and I will come back and tell you who's on next week.
All right, guys, enjoy the interview with Gregg Hale, Blair Witch Project.
I went to film school with Ed and Dan, and they had actually come up with the early framework of what Blair Witch was going to be, the kernel, the idea when they were still in film school together. And then I went to LA. I'll try to keep this as short as possible. I went to LA, came very close to kind of like dropping out of filmmaking and was just going to like work as a technician, not just, but my dream had always been to, actually make my own movies as opposed to working on other people's movies. But I decided not to do that. I came back to Florida from LA where I was working on a TV show, and Dan had DP'd my senior project. He was a guy whose sensibilities and his drive to get stuff done was somebody that I respected. And we were just kind of like hanging out and talking about like what movies we could possibly make. At the time, kind of classic indie style, raise the money and shoot a movie on the shoestring, whatever that meant.
Right.
And he kind of offhandedly, at the end of, a session one night where we were sitting around, throwing stuff against the wall, he's like, hey, Ed and I had this idea in film school, and it's about these kids that go into the woods to make a documentary about this witch, and something goes wrong, and they find these things hanging in the trees, and then they end up in this house and they all die. And we wanted to do it kind of like In Search Of style. If you guys remember that,
yeah, absolutely.
Leonard Nimoy from back in the day, which had a huge, huge influence on me and Ed and Dan. But just the way he laid out this simple story raised the hackles on the back of my neck. It was like instant response, like this visceral fear response to what he had just told me. And I was like, that's the idea. Like, whatever I've got to do, because they were both, writer, director, editor. So I knew I wasn't going to be directing, which is what I had gone to film school for.
Right.
I said, I don't care what I have to do. I want to be involved. And producing was what was
right.
left. So,
was there something about the witch angle that was particularly intriguing to you? Because if you said witch to me, I would think like, well, like what kind of witch?
it was something
did it
about
seem like
it was something about the framing. And I think at the time we were even talking about, or they were talking about it like being in the 70s, like kind of, Legend of Boggy Creek style, or, kind of In Search Of, in terms of like that 16 millimeter feel.
Yeah.
And something about it just clicked, and I had no questions. My only question was, how do I help make this movie? Because look, I think a lot of people that go to film school, unless you go to a really high-end school or a very established school that has specifically a producing program, most film schools really kind of concentrate on the writing and direction of it, and the producing it's just kind of a matter of, learn by making the shit in school, but not necessarily getting taught that much about producing, I think.
Right.
Especially like, real world producing, raising money and unions and all that kind of crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't do any of that. So I didn't really know much about producing except what I had done to produce my own stuff or help other film students produce things. But that was what I could do.
What's the next step? So everyone listening who might be at that step that says, great, we know who our writer, producer, director is. We have this great idea. Now what? Like, what did you guys do?
Well, and I mentioned this to Nate when we were kind of, Facebooking or whatever about this interview is, BLAIR is obviously a very atypical movie in terms of how it got made. So how Blair Witch got made doesn't track at all with any other movies that I've ever made since then. And
awesome.
And I don't know how much it could track with a particular project that somebody might have going right now. I think that probably if the goal here is to like try to learn a lesson or get some useful information from the conversation, I think that, in talking about Blair Witch and the process that we went through to make Blair Witch, I think the takeaway would be, one, perseverance, which I think is what everybody has to have to do it. And I think is probably the most important thing about producing, regardless of how much you know or don't know, is just persevering and pushing through. And the second would be that we adapted to what we could do to get the film made. And in the case of Blair Witch, those limitations and those pivots and changes that we made in order to actually make the film ended up being a big part of the film's success. And that's not, I don't know if that's always going to be the case with making a more typical movie, whatever that is.
Right.
So for us, our thing was, the original concept for Blair was going to be that it was going to be like an episode of In Search Of. So it was going to be footage of what happened to the kids, but really it was going to be more about like that kind of like analysis and maybe even reenactments and all that kind of stuff that In Search Of did. Here's the sheriff,
Right.
look for them, and here's the expert on witches who talks about what the witch might be doing to them at this point, or whatever. So we just kind of looked at the stuff with the kids as kind of like with the filmmakers as, okay, we're going to shoot this and then we're going to build the rest of the film around it. So we were kind of thinking that what we're going to shoot with the filmmakers was really almost kind of like a first improv pass at a script, and then we would refine it and put all the stuff in there that we wanted, for the In Search Of style part. We wrote a budget just like, traditional budget with a crew and catering and this and that and the other, and kind of shooting it like a regular film, and came up with a budget, I think, of around $350,000, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And then the idea was going to be that we were going to, do the thing that everybody did back then, which is like, let's get, a bunch of dentists together and have them give us $50,000 each, and we'll make the movie with the dentist money. That was the classic thing back then.
I remember that, yeah.
and we had definitely already kind of latched onto the whole idea, the whole concept of, is this real, right? And so we, from the very beginning, presented it as real. So we made this fake tape about the legend of the Blair Witch and Burkittsville, and that these kids went into the woods, and their footage was found a year later, and that we now had the footage. That's the way we presented it to the investors. So we kind of like did a little mini thing of the movie as if it was real, and people would freak out, and then we'd say, gotcha, that was all, narrative fiction, now give us money. And they said no. So, so we went through that for a while and literally raised no money. And so again, in terms of, perseverance and adapting, I was like, well, look, let's shoot this stuff with the kids, the filmmakers, on video. Let's give them a video camera, which is way, as you guys know, way cheaper back then than shooting 16 millimeter film. So I said, let's just shoot the majority of the stuff. They can take their film students, let them take a film camera, but and shoot some stuff on film. But the vast majority of what we'll shoot, we'll just shoot on, high 8 video. And then that obviously brought the budget down a lot. And then the second thing for me as a producer, again, not something that can probably apply to very many movies, but I had gone through survival school. I've been in the Army for 4 years, and I went through survival school, which was a highly unpleasant experience. You get some training, and then they put you out in the woods for a few days and chase you around and don't let you sleep, and you get tested and all the things that you've been trained at. And then at the end, they capture you. Everybody gets captured, and you get taken to this fake POW camp.
Right.
But the fake POW camp, after 4 or 5 days of not eating and not sleeping, and they take you into this place and start beating on you, becomes relatively real pretty quickly.
Oh my God.
So I was just like, well, why don't we just do that to the actors?
Good plan.
So we kind of then approached the production as kind of like an improv acting obstacle course, right? So the woods that they're in for almost the whole movie, except for where the house is at the very end. That's a little tiny state park in Maryland, pretty close to where Seneca Creek State Park, which is close to where Ed lived at the time. And we just went out there and scouted the hell out of that and used a GPS and did these waypoints, just kind of walked them around in a big circle because it wasn't that big. And then we set up things for them to discover, like the stick figures and then they would camp, and we would come and shake the tent and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So
that's incredible. So, all right, so let me just okay. So, out of necessity, you changed the way you filmed the movie because you couldn't get your funding. So you were originally going. Yeah. And so do I have that right? Like you don't have your 16 millimeter and you're not going to film scenes. So you're like, well, let's just give them a camera. And then, that's amazing. I have to ask you the obvious question though. Do you think you would have made a better movie if you had made it the original way that you wanted to make it?
No, hell no.
Right. So that's fascinating. So So did you have faith in the process or did you doubt it? I mean, like, it's easy to say that now, but when you were doing this, were you saying, are we crazy? Is this going to work? Is this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I think you always say that you think that you're crazy when you're making a movie. I mean, I always think I'm making a movie. But, you know, we went from a $350,000, you know, traditionally budgeted film to shooting what we called phase one. Because, again, remember, at the time, we're still planning on shooting all the in search of stuff. So the thing was, well, let's just do what we got to do to shoot the stuff with the kids, the filmmakers. And so we did that for $22,000.
Wow.
So we went from $350,000 to $22,000. And then we just started editing the footage. We had like 20-something hours, 22 hours of unique footage. So it's not takes, it's not multiple takes because we weren't doing takes. They were just kind of improvising. So we had like 22 hours of unique footage that Ed and Dan cut down into a narrative. And then again, this whole time we're still raising money, which just meant we're working and saving money and doing corporate gigs. Like we spent, I remember we got a media, I don't know how old you guys are, but if you remember the Media 100s or not, was like an editing system that at the time was kind of like, you know, it was like the cheap thing that you could get if you couldn't afford, you know, $250,000 for an Avid.
Okay.
You could get a Media 100, but we had a Media 100 that ran on a, you know, whatever the beefiest Mac that you could get at the time. And we were so psyched because it had like a tower, hot swappable tower hard drive that had like 8 gig bays in it. So we bought 32 gigs of storage and we were psyched. And that was, I think, like the Mac, the video card, the tower, all that kind of stuff. We had to take out a loan for that. That was like $32,000.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what we edited BLAIR on, but we also used that machine to do corporate videos. So we kind of paid for one step at a time, phase 2, which is like the in search of stuff, just by doing, you know, industrial gigs and make enough money and then go out and shoot something on the weekend. And so we started shooting that stuff and cutting it in to the film, to the narrative that we had of the kids, and it just didn't work. It just messed up the narrative of the kids. And we were finally like, actually our executive producer, Kevin Fox, said, the movie should just be the filmmakers in the woods. And our initial thing was like, you're fucking crazy. That's never going to work.
Right.
And finally, thank God, we realized he was right. And it wasn't an easy process because you're kind of, you know, giving up, killing your darlings.
Right.
Where we were giving up all this stuff that we had, you know, sweated over to shoot, and decided just to keep the film basically what you know of, which is the narrative of the filmmakers in the woods, all from their POV.
Right.
And then that's what we submitted to Sundance.
So whenever, going back to like when you were actually shooting the movie, there's all these kind of side characters that pop up and tell them, you know, stories about the Blair Witch, and they're all like very unique. They all seem very realistic. Can you talk a little bit about casting those people or interviewing actual people, actual townspeople?
Yeah. Well, the casting process for the actors or the filmmakers was pretty intense. We cast for, you know, I think well over a year, just because of, you know, the way the process was going and how slow we were moving because we didn't have money and all that. We cast in LA, we cast in Orlando, but mostly we cast up to New York. I think we went up to New York 2 or 3 times and did just like, you know, what's it called? What's the actor magazine thing up there? Backstage You know,
Right.
like put an open call, big fucking crazy, cattle call thing in the back of backstage. And we ended up, I think, probably saw 1,000 people maybe total.
Oh, wow.
And landed with, Mike, Heather, and Josh, all New York actors, all super strong improv skills. So a lot of effort went into casting those guys. And really, they make the movie. If we'd have got one different actor from those three, it might not have been the movie that it was, because I think they're all phenomenal in the movie. But then in terms of like the improv, obstacle course, like at the beginning, you go to this town and go to this diner and then stop at this store, was what we were telling them to do. Because we weren't communicating with them except for like these little notes that we would hide for them in places and tell them where they were. And so most of the people everybody that you see in the movie is a plant, is an actor that we just cast. And most of them were non-actors, just people that Ed thought fit the part. But I think the most amazing thing is the most effective one is the woman that's holding the little girl, and she's trying to tell about Blair Witch, and the little girl covers her mouth. That woman was not one of our plants, and she just made that shit up on the spot.
That's amazing. Well, so did she have I was going to ask you about that, because that's such a great moment in the movie, because the kid looks really scared. Was that you're saying she planned that with the kid, or did the kid just start doing
No, the kid was just reacting. Like, they just walked up to this woman, gave them their little spiel, we're making this movie, started interviewing her, and that woman just winged it, right? And her kid was really freaking out for whatever reason. It was freaking her kid out. And the actors, playing filmmakers, not actually being filmmakers, didn't get a release from that woman and didn't get her information. So we tried and tried and tried to track her down and couldn't. And Artisan, liked it so much that they allowed us to keep it in there without getting a release from her. But then
did that
later,
ever cause problems?
No, it didn't. Later, a super fan named Matt Blasey, who runs the I guess the biggest Facebook fan group, Blair Witch fan group on Facebook, he found her. Fucking somehow, I don't even remember how he found her. He found her. And now she's like part of the family. Like, her and her daughter come and like pose together, like, because her daughter's like 24 now or something. So it's crazy. That was mostly plants except for her.
Right. I have to say, every time I've seen the movie, I always think that was your guys' way. And you've just shattered my illusions here, but I've always thought that was your way, the creator's way of like winking at the audience and saying it's all fake. Because it was so believable. I mean, I remember when I saw it on the internet, I had a desk job in New Jersey, and I remember stumbling on this website, and all my friends knew I loved horror movies there. And I'm like, this is real. No, this is real. Like, you had me. I'm just telling you, I believed it by this finger. And then, but when I learned it wasn't, but I always thought that was your way of like telling the audience it's all fake, because she says that. We all know it's not true, like to calm her kid down.
Right.
And now that you shattered my, my world on that.
Yeah.
But no, it's great to hear that. It's great to hear that happened. Amazing.
Yeah. So who came up with the concept of there's not going to be, I know early on it was decided it would be mostly improv, but whose idea was it to distance yourselves completely from the actors, not actually be there to see what they're recording?
Well, I think that was probably more of a reflection of like my experience in survival school, in terms of like, I wanted to like break them down, because we let them sleep less and less each night. We gave them less and less to eat. So by the time Heather and Mike go to that house, they're, exhausted and raw on just like a human level. And that's was kind of part of the plan. We wanted to kind of isolate them and really allow them to sink into it, which I think by and large they enjoyed, because they're actors and they're New York actors and they love that intense shit. So, but yeah, that was part of the plan, was to kind of isolate them and let that isolation and that the physical challenges that we were putting them through to let them use that as like fuel for their acting.
How long was the shoot then? So you were kind of like giving them less to eat.
8 days.
So yeah, in that amount of time, they were stressed. They were getting more stressed, and you shot sequentially as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, shot real time.
Okay.
I mean, we basically just ran them through the events as they would have happened to the actors. But we did have one interruption. We had this safety word, which I think was bulldozer or taco or something. Like it's kind of like a safe word in S&M, right? They say the word and then we stop. And one day it was like raining, pouring down rain. So they were moving faster than normal. We were moving slower than normal. And we didn't make them carry all the gear. Like they carried some of the stuff, but most of the heavy stuff they left, and we would pick it up and move it ahead of them so we didn't totally kill them. So we were moving slower doing all our part but they really were hauling ass because they just wanted to get out of the rain and get to their tent. So when they got to the place where they needed to set up the tent, we weren't there. And they couldn't raise us on the radio. And then they freaked out and they were like, fuck it. And they just dropped all their stuff on the forest floor, put a tarp over it or something, and then went and found somebody's house. And amazingly, this woman let them in. and eventually they got a hold of us through her phone. And I think maybe we had one cell phone. I mean, this was 90. I don't even know if we had a cell phone. They somehow got in touch with us. So we went and got them and took them to a hotel. And I seriously thought that they were going to like quit and not come.
Oh, no.
But we kind of, let them get in a hotel and get dried off. And I didn't let them take showers, but we let them like dry off and warm up and like eat a little bit. And then they were energized enough to go back out in the woods the next day. But other than that, it was all real time. And then at the end, we did have to move them, the Rustin Parr house, the house that they end up at the very end.
How did you find that house, by the way?
You know what? All of that location stuff was really based on Ed living there. And some friends of his had found this abandoned house, and I think it was called Patapsco State Park. Patapsco State Park, which is just kind of like mostly just kind of like a big woods. There's like hardly any trails or anything in it. And their friends, some friends of Ed had found that house. So we knew it was there, and we had gone and, tried to make it as safe as possible because everything was rotten. So we like reinforced stairs and floors and things like that. So we didn't kill anybody. And so we did have to like put them in a van and drive them to that park, and at that time it was just Mike and Heather, and then finish the rest of the film, really, which is just them going up and finding the house is all we shot. And then the stuff inside the house, of course.
Yeah, because I thought I don't remember if it was part of when I interviewed Ed or if I read it, that there was maybe an incident where like one of the batteries died when they were shooting something about.
Yeah. We did actually have to. So that was the only thing that was like shot multiple takes of, because the batteries went out. So we had to like get that fixed, and we had to come back a second night. And at that point we had broken, the scenario enough that we just went ahead and shot multiple takes so that we could get everything that we wanted. But even when we were shooting multiple takes, it was really just kind of letting them go through the house on their own without us.
Wow.
And you had mentioned earlier about the notes that you were leaving them. Can you talk a little bit about like that process?
Yeah. So like, we would, like, from the obstacle course standpoint of, running them through the different things that were happening in the film, some of those were just creative things, but then some of them were logistical. Like it'd be like, I could go to this point on the GPS, and we would have like milk crates with bike flags sticking up out of them so they could find it. And then we would resupply them with fresh batteries and water and food, although less and less food. And then each of them had a little film canister, a little 35 millimeter film canister with a note in it that talked about their characters' motivations for the next few hours, and something is going to happen that's going to scare you, and you do this and you do that, and you be mad about it and you want to leave, but we told them to never show their notes to each other, so that their motivations were always hidden from the other actors.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Now, did you have to get like permits and stuff to film there, or would you just go for it?
No, we did. We did. I was at least producery enough to know that we would be fucked if we got caught out there at a state park, trying to. Mostly because it was really tiny, and you couldn't. You weren't allowed to camp or anything like that. So we kind of knew that if we were out there with them camping with fires and that kind of stuff, that we would get caught, and then once we got caught, we'd be done. So
they shut you down.
Yeah, so we did pull permits for that, and Rob Cowie, the other producer, helped a lot with that because he's better at talking to official people than I am. But yeah, we pulled permits for both of the parks. We did not pull any permits or ask for any sort of permission from Burkittsville, which ended up kind of being a nightmare.
I was going to say, that was kind of infamous, right?
Yeah, that was a little. They were not. We did not have a lot of fans in Burkittsville there for a while, for sure.
Amazing. Okay, so you finished 8 days of filming. You have how many hours? Did you say like 20 something?
22, I think.
22 hours.
20.
Amazing.
22 hours.
Okay, so how did the editing process go? I mean, that's a lot of footage.
A lot of footage.
That's
really,
improv.
I think, like from a filmmaking perspective, I mean, especially since the writing, so to speak, is very non-traditional, and the directing, so to speak, is just notes in film canisters, very non-traditional. Really Ed and Dan's strength as filmmakers shows in the edit.
Yeah.
So it was a very tedious process. We went through a lot of cuts. There's a 3-hour cut, a 2-hour and 45-minute cut, a 2.5-hour cut, and a 2-hour cut, and all the way down to it's just a little over. It's like an 84 minutes, I think, running time. It's not even an hour. So a lot of whittling down and kind of like trying to get the story down to just like the leanest version of it that we could come up with. I actually just watched, last year was the 20th anniversary of the movie coming out.
Right.
And I had not seen it in 20 years. And,
whoa.
And a local, because you guys know how it is. After you make a movie, it's the last fucking thing you want to do is watch that.
Exactly.
So I'd seen it plenty. But a local Portland has a really amazing like art house movie theater. They have a few, but there's one called the Hollywood. Does an amazing job of finding old prints, and they found a 35 millimeter print of BLAIR, which amazed me. And so we did like a 20th anniversary screening with a little Q&A and stuff, and it was really cool to go. And my kids got to go. My kids had never seen the movie.
Wow.
So my kids got to go, and we got to watch it on 35 millimeter in a packed house, big theater, and it was really cool to kind of watch it as removed as I possibly could be, after 20 years. But it really struck me how good the fucking edit is of that movie. Especially since I know how much work it was to get it to that point. But I really think it's a very, very well edited film, and I can say that because that's Ed and Dan, not me.
Right. Were there any particular producing challenges during post-production? Anything that stands out to you that just outside of the actual cut and making sure the narrative is down and everything? Was there anything that kind of?
Well, I mean, it's the kind of bullshit that I think every production has to deal with, especially when you don't have any money.
Right.
So we had like done a in-service, in-kind investment for this post house there in Orlando where we were posting it, and they were going to do the sound and all that stuff for the cut that ended up going into Sundance. And we shot everything on high 8. we transferred what little 16 millimeter we had. We transferred that, and ultimately, what we were mastering off of was Beta SP, which was that was the highest quality that you could get.
I remember that. Yeah.
Which is kind of amazing. But so Beta SP were our master tapes. So that's what we did. The master transfer, putting all the sound and everything on that, and then digitizing for the edit off of those. So that when we would conform, we'd go back to those digibeta tapes, because you had to online back then, because we weren't, we couldn't edit in a full res environment,
right?
Much lower res environment, and then you would go back and online later, conform. And we discovered when we actually went and did the sound that the people who had done our post, in-kind services, investment thing, had used old digibetas or beta SPs that they had old Disney parades on.
Oh my God! Did that cause problems?
So instead of using new tapes, which is what you would think they would do,
yeah,
they used old tapes. So when we went in and we were actually starting to really dig into the sound, when you're not just listening to it, off the little tiny speakers that you're editing with, when we really started listening to the sound, we're like, what the fuck is in the background? And then we would piece it together when it would be quiet enough that it was a Disney parade.
Oh my God! Because you guys must have been shitting.
So we had to redo all that. So that was but I think that's just kind of a typical bullshit. And post is a fucking nightmare anyway, I think, especially back then, because and it's changed pretty soon. Not too long after 99, you can probably look it up, but in 99 you had to have a print. You had to have a film print. So the most money that we spent, we shot the movie and did everything, and by the time we submitted it to Sundance, we had probably spent $35,000 on the movie total. Then when we got into Sundance, we had to get a print and a new sound mix and all that kind of stuff. So just spending just the money that we needed to really go to Sundance and do it right with a print was $40,000 or whatever it was back then, just for one film print,
right,
to do that transfer. And then a publicist and flying everybody out there and putting everybody up, and and we made hats and posters and all this shit. That was $115,000.
Yeah. A lot of producers don't understand. They don't know how expensive the delivery is. The movie is.
Oh, well, that isn't. Yes. Well, that isn't even delivery. That isn't even delivery. That was just getting our asses to the film festival.
So how did that happen then? So obviously you submitted your film. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because that's a massive achievement. Every filmmaker wants their film at Sundance. So how did you pull that off? I mean, you're telling us a little bit about it now, but we
did learn that so much stuff is just right place, right time, as it is, I think, a lot of times in a lot of projects. But, we were doing a screening in Orlando where we were just showing one of those longer cuts, a 2.5 hour cut, which actually, when I think about it now, it just sounds torturous. But a 2.5 hour cut, and we were just letting family and friends come and watch it and give us feedback so we could figure out what we wanted to do with the cut. And this guy showed up, friend of a friend. I forget who brought him. His name is Kevin Fox, and he ended up being our executive producer. And he came up to us after. He's like, look, I've gone through the festival process. I understand how it works. This movie will get into Sundance if you let me help you. And we're like, yeah, right on. So Kevin, as opposed to us, who knew nothing about the business except how to actually just get our movie made, and really just in kind of the bullshit way that we ended up making it, he actually, lived in LA and kind of made real films, in quotes. So
Right.
he hooked us up with an attorney. He hooked us up with a publicist. He hooked us up with an agent. But then he also kind of like knew who to get the tape to at Sundance. Because even back then in 99, I can only imagine how many films they get submitted now. It might just be incredible. But I think back then, even in 99, I think they were getting a couple of thousand features submitted. So, you know, not only does your film have to be good, you just have to make sure that your film gets seen by the right person who doesn't throw it into the stack of like, I don't give a fuck.
Sure.
Because they're looking at 2,000 movies. So that was a big part of it, was just like, oh shit, you know, which is like, that's something that I didn't know at the time, was like the festival circuit. And you know, like I told you guys when we were doing this, I don't really produce anymore. So this could be like completely like back in my day kind of talk. But
Go for it.
but back in my day, you know, the festival circuit for an indie film was vital. Like you really had to get into Sundance or AFI or you know, or Cannes or you know, any one of the big film festivals that had AFM, not AFI, that had a market component, you know, and that's not many. Sundance, you know, New York Film Festival, you know, there's a few that had like a market component where you could actually sell your film, and Sundance was the king shit of all those.
Right.
And just managing that festival process is at least back then was a huge part of the job, you know. And fortunately for us with BLAIR, at least, it kind of, Sundance didn't fall in our lap. We would work our asses off to get there, but once we were in Sundance, we then just had to maximize on that one opportunity because we sold the movie there. But we put a ton of work into getting everything set up so that BLAIR worked the way that it did at the festival. Like I said, we had a really good lawyer, we had a really good agent, we had a really good publicist and publicity team. And so we went in there with a plan and, you know, and implemented it. And part of that plan was, you know, we approached it just like production. You know, we had tasks that we had to do, and we went through that list and we got it done and tried to like have really good materials, whether that's hats or pins or really a really good poster. And we kind of did publicity stuff where we put up missing flyers of the filmmakers, you know, and
which was brilliant.
You know, kind of pushing this idea of is this real or not?
So was that is this real or not? Was that something you did for Sundance, or was that part of the plan from the beginning?
Well, from the beginning, because, you know, it's like I was saying, we kind of did that is this real thing with the way we approach the investors at the beginning.
Right.
You know? So that had always kind of been our approach. And we adapted that approach to Sundance and did that in the festival.
So you were walking around Sundance and putting up little posters, and were people believing it, or were they thinking, "What's, you know, this is promo for a movie"? Because I'm telling you, you had me. Like, I thought it was real, and all my friends thought it was real. But you know, we're not in Hollywood. I was living out in New Jersey at that time.
Yeah.
But there was a very real belief that this was a real movie. Was it like that at Sundance, or were you?
Well, prior to Sundance, we had a couple of things that happened prior to Sundance that fed into that. One, again, happenstance. Ed had broken up with his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife. So he was all sad and didn't have anything to do. And Ed, in 97, 98, could code HTML. He could code websites, which back then, like now, my 10-year-old son could make a website if he wanted to in about 15 minutes.
Right.
Back then, coding a website was actually difficult.
Yeah.
And
I've done my share of HTML coding. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. So Ed could do that because he had got a job with his cousins at a company that did that kind of stuff. He had learned how to do it with them. So he coded our website. So we had a website. I mean,
I can picture it in my head. I know exactly what the site is. I can see it in my head.
Yeah. So Ed built that. Ed built that site, So so between so really three things. So we had a website, and then we had also you guys know who John Pearson is, right? No,
John Pearson. Okay.
So for Producerville, I would highly suggest it. Again, this is very old school. I don't know how much of this shit would apply anymore, but John Pearson used to be there was a name for a person back then called a producer's rep, which is basically acted as your sales agent at film festivals.
Okay.
Like he did Spike Lee's first movie. He did, Kevin Smith's first movie. So he's got this book called Spike, Mike, Slackers, and Dykes. He did Michael Moore. He did Slacker.
I'm not sure if producer reps are a thing now. Are they?
Probably not. Probably not.
Okay, we got to look into that because this is.
But look up that book. look up that book. It's amazing. I think now it's probably more like a little time capsule from back then.
Right.
But it's worth a read for the kind of the birth of contemporary or modern American independent cinema. It's a pretty amazing.
Well, I just looked it up and added it to my Amazon account. So thank you for that.
But John had seen our fake tape that we used on our investors, and he believed it. And he was so impressed that we fooled him that he said, I'll give you money in advance to have your project be part of 2 episodes of this show he had on IFC at the time called Split Screen. So 10 of the $22,000 that we had for shooting the first part of BLAIR came from John Pearson.
Oh, wow.
He bought 2 segments, one before we shot and one after we shot about the film. So the website, John Pearson, and then being on Split Screen, and then really getting bootlegged all to hell. Like there were so many bootlegs of our film floating around Hollywood that it became like this super secret cult thing of, oh my God, have you seen this fucking crazy video of this snuff film of these kids getting killed in the woods? And it kind of made and they were all legitimate bootlegs. People are like, oh, you guys planted that. And I'm like, I wish we were that smart, but no, it was really like.
Well, that's where the luck comes in, you know?
Yeah,
that's
again, So we kind of had this weird, trifecta of things kind of pushing people already to the movie at the festival.
Yeah.
Which a lot of films don't have. Like people had an awareness of the movie coming to the festival. And because we had really good agents, like our agents were Endeavor when Endeavor was 5 guys.
Right.
And now they're the biggest agency in the world.
Yeah.
Back then it was 5 dudes that had all just quit other agencies.
I remember them when they formed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had the one thing that every filmmaker wants at Sundance. You had buzz around your movie.
We did have buzz.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have that, you just get lost. And so here you are making this little movie, and you have this genius idea, this incredible execution, and this luck of this buzz happening in Hollywood, and all of a sudden you show up to a festival and people are kind of waiting to see this snuff film or whatever film. Amazing. That's incredible. That's incredible for you guys.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and did the whole, do the negotiation from 2 a.m. till 6 a.m. and sell it the night of the screening and all that shit. Yeah, It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
What was when did the Curse of the Blair Witch, that kind of promo thing kind of come about? Because when you were talking about the original idea for the movie being sort of like the In Search of show, that Curse of the Blair Witch feature kind of felt more like that.
Yeah. So that was all the stuff that we had shot that was gonna go into the movie. And Artisan was like, hey, Sci-Fi Channel would be willing to do some sort of promo thing. Do you guys have anything? And we were like, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And actually we survived on that money, like that they paid us to make the thing. That's probably what allowed us to survive to get to the point to where we could actually deliver the film, was the money that we got to make that sci-fi special, Curse of the Blair Witch. So that was all the stuff that we had shot for the film.
So you basically just ended up finding, or were presented with another way to use that footage.
Yeah, exactly.
Who designed the poster for the movie?
The Sundance poster, or the
the Sundance poster. Yeah,
the Sundance poster was a couple of friends of mine, Scott Sugiuchi, and I'm going to space Steve Carcella, and I hope I'm saying his last name right. Were friends of mine who were graphic artists, and we hired them to do the poster. So that original Sundance poster, black with a little thing of Heather's face and then the really cool kid's hands all over it. That was those guys, and I forget what their company was called at the time. But yeah, friends of mine, two friends of mine did it.
Now, was there any guidance given to them about the look of it? I mean, from a producing perspective, like it's the first thing that people see, unless it's the trailer, But did you give them any guidance? How involved were you in the marketing? The look of it.
I mean, for that stuff where it was like, we're paying for it directly, we were very involved. We knew that we wanted Heather's face, that we were very clear about that. And then another thing that Scott and Steve did was they, obviously we had the design of the stick figure that was really Ben Rock, the production designer. But they're the ones who came up with kind of like the logoized version of it, and we all thought that was very important too. So we were pretty involved. They came up with the whole printing thing of like the invisible kid handprints on it, and we just thought that was the coup de grace.
Is there anything that you would have done differently as a producer during the production?
I mean, look, man. I mean, the way things turned out, I'd be an idiot to change anything. It was
exactly. That's a good attitude.
It was so far beyond what any of us could have possibly. And I've got a pretty good fucking imagination. It's like the Han Solo line. Well, I can imagine a lot. I could not have imagined the movie doing what the movie did. We never imagined that the movie was going to do what it did. Even when it was doing it, we were like, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
So, I mean, I would not want to do, I mean, look, we ended up getting sued. At one point, I counted, talk about the producery part that they don't teach you in film school. After the movie came out and it was making all the money and all that kind of shit, as you can imagine, people started coming out of the woodwork. Anybody that we had ever said the word witch to suddenly, was suing us.
Oh, wow.
So at one point I counted and I had 11 attorneys. We had 11 attorneys.
Oh my God.
That was dealing with all the different lawsuits that we were handling. And, so that shit is highly stressful and very unpleasant, especially when some of the people that are suing you are people that you thought were your friends before they sued you. But, look, dude, I mean, anytime there's like that amount of money, out there, there's going to be lawsuits. That's what I've learned from the Hollywood side of things is, money equals lawsuits. Basically.
Now, now, I know that lawsuits are, there's confidentiality agreements and things like that, but were these like frivolous or were they, I mean, I'm surprised. I was actually nervous earlier in the conversation when you said, oh, that woman holding the toddler, like someone found her. If I was the producer, I would have been like, no, don't talk to her. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, but look, I mean, at some point, Artisan assumed that responsibility because we told Artisan, look, we can't find her. So if you want to take delivery, you have to take delivery without a release from her.
Got it.
We had to do we had to go back and get all of our releases all the major releases we had to get retroactively, like Cliff Bars and the Marshmallows and like all the stuff that were showing logos. We had to retroactively go and ask for permission for that. And fortunately, everybody did it. We got permission to use the Gilligan Island lyrics. There was a song that we had to replace when they pull up to pick up Mike. There was like a bird song or something playing in the background, and we couldn't get the rights to that. So that we actually had to re-record and do ADR for and everything, and just replace all the sound in that scene, because we had to put, again, a friend of mine's band is playing on the radio.
Right.
But from a rights perspective, we had to do almost everything retroactively.
So did you find out at that stage of like delivery and all of that like, did you know when you were filming the movie that, oh, this will be fine, or were you not thinking about marshmallow clearances when you were making the movie?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I mean, the filmmakers were shooting that stuff, so we definitely weren't thinking about it, or the actors were filming that stuff, so we definitely weren't thinking about it during filming. We discussed it a little bit when we were editing, but ultimately we were like, well, at the time, I mean, look, man, I mean, like at every step we were like amazed that we finished the movie, amazed that we got into Sundance, amazed.
Right.
We were never thinking, oh man, I hope this Cliff Bar shot doesn't keep us from selling the movie for $1 million.
Right. That's exactly what I'm at. Exactly what I'm addressing.
Yeah.
Like,
no, so that was we were just like, let's
thing.
just go for it. I mean, and for us, you kind of needed that kind of stuff to root it in the real world. Those are very real moments. Those are moments that everybody can relate to. And like being in a grocery store and getting all your dumb bullshit food that's really not very good for camping. I mean, that's something that everybody's done. So that kind of stuff, like creatively, we made the call of let's go with what works creatively and not worry so much about the producery, oh my God, I don't have Cliff Bars clear.
Yeah. It's kind of like watching a movie now and they go in their search browser and it's like some obviously made up for the movie. Like it's not Google, it's like Joogle or something, and it's like, it jumps out. Yeah, I believe you're right. It's like the Cliff Bar, if it was something else, something made up for the movie, it can take you out of the movie. And for this particular movie, when you're trying to hook people, you want to avoid those things. I think that was very smart of you guys.
Yeah. Or just cutting that all together, just let's just not show it would have been our option.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So so we went for it, and then we got lucky. We replaced the bird song from the very beginning because we knew that was always going to be problematic. No, that's not true. In Sundance, it probably played with the bird song, and then we re-recorded it later after, I think.
So would you say that, I mean, because Sundance is where you're just trying to sell it. So is it kind of like anything goes, you can put any music in it, or does Sundance have guidelines that say, well, there's a Bruce Springsteen song in this movie, so we can't accept it? I mean, it's really just a place for people to watch it in hopes that you sell it.
I think it's usage. I think like for that thing, it was like playing in the back of the car. I don't think it was a big deal. I think if you were going to use a Bruce Springsteen song or something, and that's going to be the track that you're using, and you've chosen that. I think even that you've got to have like at least festival rights for. A lot of times they'll give you festival rights for next to nothing. At least that used to be a thing. Again, dude, I feel like I'm such a dinosaur with the I don't know but that used to be a thing. Festival rights where you could get like festival rights to a song. It's like, okay, I'll let you use this song, for free or for next to nothing, just for festivals, and then if the movie sells, I'll get some.
Yeah.
So I have, I guess it's 3 questions really. You can answer them as quickly as you want. They're kind of out there, but I got to ask them.
All right. When
the time came that a sequel was brought up, did you want to be involved with it, or was that something that you right off the bat was like, I'm not interested in being a part of the sequel?
No, we wanted to be involved, but that was kind of we wanted to be involved, but our involvement was kind of a 2-part answer. One, Dan and Ed had just spent like, on top of all the stuff that we had done with the filmmaking, because they were like the poster children. I mean, they were on the cover of Time, for God's sakes. They had gone all around the world. Not to every country the movie came out in, but a lot of them. They had gone all around the world doing press and all this kind of stuff, and they were just fucking tired of hearing the word Blair Witch. So Dan and Ed just wanted to do something else that wasn't Blair Witch, but we would do a Blair Witch movie, but just not right away. And we didn't want to do another. To us, like found footage and all that kind of stuff was like, that worked for that story. but we didn't want to make another found footage Blair Witch movie. We wanted to make a prequel movie that really, and I love The Witch, but The Witch was pretty much the movie that we wanted to make that was like the prequel, like what happened in the 1600s kind of thing. That's what we wanted to do. And Artisan at the time was, again, back in the day, that was when everybody was doing IPOs. And Artisan, from the very beginning, had really just been an IPO play. Like, you know that Mitt Romney was tangentially involved in Blair Witch because he ran Bain Capital, which was the hedge fund or investment fund that basically funded Artisan. And the whole idea was just to create Artisan to the point where it could do an IPO and then sell it. I mean, that's what those companies do. So once they had Blair Witch, I mean, the biggest movie before that had been Pi, which had made, it's a great movie, but it had made a few $1 million. And suddenly they had a movie that made $241 million. And they were like, oh shit. There was going to be Blair Witch 2 on their IPO, fucking no matter what we said. So they're like, well, we don't care. So they literally went out and hired 5 or 6 or 7 screenwriters and just said, write a fucking Blair Witch movie. And that's what they did. And then they picked one. So we said, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Just wait. Just give us like 6 months and we'll make a Blair Witch movie. One, they weren't going to wait. And 2, I don't think they were that interested in making a moody, atmospheric, set in the 1600s horror film. But so they went out and hired 7 screenwriters or 5 screenwriters or whatever, wrote 5 scripts, sent their favorite to us. We said, we hate it. Please don't make it. They made it.
God.
And yeah, so that was pretty much.
Yeah, I remember like when I interviewed Ed, he was saying that even some of the early ones, the early drafts they sent, like he said there was one where like the first like 20 pages was just trashing their movie. Like it was just these characters talking about how much the movie sucked and they left the theater and they hated it. And he was like, we were like, what are they doing? It was just so
really
bad.
And really, the movie, The Book of Shadows that they ended up making kind of does that too, because it kind of says, well, the movie didn't exist. Like the things that happened in the movie didn't actually happen. It was a movie. Like it was kind of like, it was weird. Like, okay, so you're making a sequel to a movie that you're saying didn't happen. Like, I don't understand. I don't like,
yeah.
And Joe Berlinger is a great documentary filmmaker, but and I understand he was trying to do something different too, but I just think it was just, doomed from day one, that fucking project. They brought us a print when they first finished it. They brought a print and like sent some, smooth talking executive with the print to like watch the movie with us and rented us a big theater so that we could watch it together. And we've Mystery Science Theater the shit out of that movie, dude. It was brutal. It was brutal. And we did it with the executive sitting in there with us. Like at the end, we were just like, it was just like nonstop jokes, because the jokes just kind of build up on each other. So by the end, we were barely even watching the movie. We were busting on it so hard.
Wow. What did the rep do? What did the rep do?
What can they do? I mean, well, thanks, guys. I mean, I don't know.
Thanks for your valuable input.
Yeah, thanks for your
We'll
feedback.
consider it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So the second question that I had was, what was, to me, like, I can remember, which I love the Blair Witch. I was like obsessed with it when it first came out. One thing that really stands out in my mind was how much merchandise there was when that movie came out. And it was so like, it was almost ahead of its time, because now, there's action figures of every horror character. There's so much horror merchandise, but there wasn't a lot in 1999. And there was like stickmen. They were everywhere. They were on t-shirts. There were ashtrays. There were lighters. There were flashlights, clothing, video games, books, comic books. What was that like?
Well, I mean, almost all of it was a total like reverse engineered shit show. Like most of the merchandising was just like literally shit like you could get from that you can have made while you wait at the mall, right? I mean, it was just like anything that they could we had like Blair Witch flasks and Blair Witch diaries.
I remember those.
Like just so dumb, but it was just because there's a company that can put fucking anything on a flask. Put a stick figure on it. That'll be a Blair Witch flask. So
That's amazing.
but there was some pretty cool stuff. Like Kubrick did some figures, those little Kubrick figures. Yeah. Those are fucking cool. I got some of those sitting on my shelf. I'd love the Todd McFarlane Blair Witch figure. That I fucking love that. But that came much later. The Kubrick thing came a little later too. And then the video games, like we actually, believe it or not, we actually carved out the only rights that we carved out. Because we sold everything lock, stock, and barrel, of course. We gave them everything. The only thing that we carved out that we controlled the rights to was the video games. So we got to do the video games, which didn't turn out great, but we were like kind of directly working with the developer to make. There was 3 of them, if you can fucking believe that.
Yeah, I remember there was like Volume 1, Volume 2.
Yes, and really Volume 1's the only one that's worth a shit. But but we were, very, very involved in that and like got that money ourselves. That was like, not quite George Lucas trading $50,000 of his fee for merchandising rights. Not quite, but so we got that money and got to control that part of the process ourselves.
Now, is that still? Is that held true today? Because there was a video game that came out, I believe, last year.
Very good question. No, and this is another legal thing that I can't talk about. But at some point, there were other contracts drawn up that gave everything to them. I'm telling you, man, that was like legalese and learning legal. I mean, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, and I would never, profess to be able to replace a lawyer. But I can read a contract pretty fucking good now. And that's something that you don't learn in film school, is all the rights and contracts and how to cover your ass with all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's such a big part of the job.
Absolutely. You learn as you go.
But that can be painful, man. If you can get a lawyer, I mean, I know that most people are not in a position where you can have actual professional legal advice, especially if you do something really low budget.
Right.
But I really highly suggest, and I've always been, when I was producing, I was usually pretty good about this, even in the early days, of drawing up contracts for things, even if it's just something that you draw up yourself, just to memorialize what you're thinking is usually going to be a huge help, unless you're actively trying to fuck people over.
Right.
It's probably to your advantage to have paperwork about stuff.
Yeah.
And going to that, like you're saying, it can be awkward and it can be a little weird, especially when you're asking people to do something for free or for no money, and they're like, "Oh, would you mind signing over all the rights to this free thing that you're doing?" But you gotta. You gotta. I mean, that's the way it works. Because now they want everything, when you're delivering something, which we could do multiple podcasts just on the fucking delivery process.
Yeah.
A nightmare. They want everything, locked in, solid, no doubt, 100%. They own it all. And the only way you can do that is through your own, chain of title and the paperwork and stuff that you're putting together is all that you've got for that. So I think you've got to stay on top of that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it sucks because it's not creative. I mean, I got into filmmaking to make films, not to, read contracts. So it's not the funnest part of the process, but, as a producer, you've got to make that part of something that you're going to pay attention to.
So I have one final random kind of question.
All right.
So the Blair Witch Project, it's arguably, not even really arguably, it's one of the most successful movies of all time. It's one of the most popular horror movies of all time. Everybody's at least seen it. If they haven't seen it, they know what it is. It's one of those movies that everybody knows. There's only ever been one, kind of, there was a DVD, then there was the Blu-ray, and that's it. And even for the 20th anniversary, they never did, like, the studio never did anything special for it. There's never been any special features beyond what was on the original release. But there was at one time a documentary called The Woods Movie that seemed like it was going to be amazing. There was a trailer that went around and then it kind of like vanished. Is there any information you can tell people about that?
Well, obviously we know the guy that made the Woods movie, and I think he showed it in a couple of festivals. But then ultimately, it's like you were saying about rights and stuff, when it comes to actually selling it and putting it out there where people can see it, ultimately Artisan or Lionsgate now has to sign off on that. And they're just not, they're just not interested. Obviously, they're not even interested enough to do anything for the 20th anniversary. So I just don't think they're interested in putting any sort of effort into that. So I don't know. Another friend of ours who actually shot all the original behind the scenes stuff, he's edited something together too that's pretty good, and he's done a lot of contemporary interviews, but he can't really move forward because he can't get anybody at Lionsgate to give him the go-ahead. And they're just not motivated to do that. Because
I was going to ask you why you think that is. I mean, is it just because, Blair Witch is in the rearview mirror kind of thing? Or like if they had a new project in the works, would then they be interested in...
I mean, in some ways, this kind of comes full circle to the whole contract thing. Like I drew up the contracts for the actors, right? And I'm not, and I just don't think that covers, from Lionsgate's like legal department's perspective, they are not 100% sure that they have the rights to the behind the scenes because of the way the contracts were drawn up. And I haven't seen the original contracts in years. I don't even know what they say, but I think Lionsgate is like, well, we don't know. It's like kind of like what we were saying about delivery, right? So I wrote shitty contracts. They want it to be 100% locked down, and it's not. So they're just like, we're just not gonna mess with this.
I see.
That's my understanding.
So I just have to ask. So you just sat there and just typed up an agreement? Is that what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I don't even think Google even exists. I don't think Google even existed. I'm sure I looked up some examples somewhere or found a book or something and kind of copied it. But yeah, I drew up all the original contracts with stuff that I drew up.
Oh wow. Well, I mean, I've done that too. I mean, for some small thing, it's like you just type it up. You're like, I'm not going to pay a lawyer $350 an hour.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, it's basically pretty simple. You're going to act in this movie, and I own your likeness. There you go.
Yeah.
So I could see you thinking like that, especially way back when you're just out of film school and you're trying to put this movie together. Of course, you did that. I mean, yeah. So I understand why you would do that, but. No, yeah. Hey, you did it. Look where it got you. I mean, amazing.
Exactly.
So you didn't do anything wrong.
Well, I probably did something wrong. We're just not wrong enough to interfere with the important stuff. We just can't make a documentary 20 years later.
Right. Fascinating.
I guess that's a good trade-off for now.
Well, Gregg, thank you so much for being on Producerville. I've known Nate for, I would say, 10 years. We talk about Blair Witch frequently. It comes up all the time. It made a huge impact on us. I can still remember when I first saw the website on I was at work. I was in a suit and a tie. I was in my cubicle, and I was like, "We have the internet now." And I was like, and I stumbled on your site, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, "This is real!" And I obsessed over the Blair Witch Project for a month before I saw it, and I went with like 10 friends to go into like New York to go see it, and half of them were nauseous after. Because I remember some of my friends they were nauseous after they saw it.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think if you had to sit up close.
Yeah.
I think if you had to sit up close on a big screen, I could totally see how you would get sick. Especially back then, people weren't used to seeing that,
Yeah, it was definitely brand new kind of style. And we were still sitting there going, this has to be real because the performers were real. You had the right actors that weren't acting. They felt super real. And
Yeah.
you know, even like movies that owe a lot to your franchise, like Paranormal Activity, you know, they knew from watching your movie to cast actors that would be believable. Otherwise, it's all for nothing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because there is some styles of acting just don't work for.
Yeah. How did you know that you had the right actors? I know that you found the actors, but how did you know they were right? Was it a feeling in the room? What was it? What was the acting process like? Like, what did you give them to do to audition?
Well, we tried to do, first of all, we told everybody, you're basically trying out for what is going to be a nightmare if you get cast. If you get cast, we're going to take you in the woods, we're going to deprive you of sleep, deprive you of food, and we're going to psychologically torture you for a week. So that was, you know, the get-go. They had to sign a waiver saying that they understood that before they even walked in the room. And as soon as they walked in the room, we wouldn't say anything to them. We would just start asking them questions as if they were in an improv scene without telling them that they were going to be in an improv scene or what it was.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
So we would just be like, so, you know, have a seat, Heather. Tell us why we should let you out of prison. And then just let them go. And really, you eliminated a lot of people from just the people who that put back on their heels enough that they paused and had to think about it. Like those we almost cut immediately. It was the people who could just be like, who got the information and who immediately jumped into character.
Right.
That was like level one. And then we continued to do that throughout the process, just kind of kept challenging them with improv situations. To kind of challenge them as actors. And then after we got down to, you know, 5 or 6 choices for each one, it kind of became a little bit of a chemistry thing between the actors. But it was very much a trial by fire of really challenging them on an improv thing so that they weren't actory. It's a win-win for sure. We got actors that could pull it off, and, you know, they got to be in a movie that, you know, gave them a little starting point for a career.
Well, Gregg, we want to thank you very much for being a part of this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much.
This movie.
You know, like I said, I love talking about myself, so. That was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you.
Gregg was amazing. Didn't you think that was a great interview?
That was like one of my favorite interviews. It was very revealing because, you know, you mentioned seeing it for the first time. You know, of course, I recall seeing it for the first time myself, and you know, you always hear the shortened version of how a movie like that comes to be. So we're all basically told these guys just got this idea, they got like $20,000 together, they made the movie, it went to Sundance, and boom, it made $200 million. You don't hear all these problems that happen during production of a movie like that.
Absolutely. So next week we have a real treat. We have the producers of Open Water, and you've got to hear their story. If you're out there listening to Producerville, you have to hear the rags to riches. Oh my God, this is actually happening. You know, we're at Sundance, and I don't want to spoil it for you. So tune in next week to hear the producers of Open Water, the husband-wife team. They're amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to Producerville. We'll see you next week.